Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shells, desolate service peasants, vassals, minions. I'm Useful Idiot. Welcome. And today I want to talk about the whole concept that the elites don't want a recovery. That's another reason why I say that the recovery that we have now, that's it. The recovery is for the 1%. The recovery is for the 10%. The recovery is not for the 99%. And so this definitely is the new normal. There's been some very huge fundamental changes in the American economy in a direct result of trends over the last 10 or 20 years, including trade agreements, which continue to go on. And so under normal circumstances, one would assume, based on previous history, particularly the industrial age, that the recovery that everyone would want, including the corporations, would be a greater employment, rising wages, and less inequality. And so those are all the expectations that American citizens have for the economy. And they look to the government, and they look to Barack Obama, the president, and Congress, and whoever. And they want to see this recovery where there is greater employment, rising wages, and less inequality. And the new normal is the exact opposite of that. We're going to have less employment. We're going to have lowering wages. In spite of this blip of the efforts to raise the minimum wage across the nation, that will eventually end up only affecting a much smaller percentage by the time those changes are in effect, and it will be a moot point in a way because automation is going to continue to replace more and more jobs. But anyway, so we're not going to have rising wages, we're not going to have increased employment, and we're certainly not going to have less inequality. In fact, we're going to have more. Another reason why this is relevant at this point is because everyone is certainly aware of the huge income inequality in the United States. Has become a very, very big issue. It's been a big issue for a while, but it's really in headlines now. And yet another new study has come out that's shown that the top 1%, who own 48% of all the global wealth right now, by 2016, that's next year, they will finally surpass the bottom 99%. They will own between 50 and 52% of all global wealth on the planet, and that's they will finally own more than the bottom 99%, and that is an example of what this economic crisis has created. Another opportunity for a huge transfer of wealth to the very rich, of the 1%, who have seen their wealth skyrocket while everyone else is suffering. So anyway, let's get back to some more about just the whole idea of why things have changed. And a lot of this information I have is based on a really excellent study that I'll attach below. And they point out this fact that the corporations and elites do not necessarily want a recovery anymore, but they don't take the logical step and talk about financialization of the economy and also the Federal Reserve. So anyway, let's get into what they had to say. First of all, they said that previously the corporate class would be just as anxious for a return to so-called quote economic growth, unquote. So this manic mantra of the capitalist system that demands exponential growth, continual exponential growth, and this is based on labor expansion. And this is just not true anymore. There will be labor contraction because there's going to be labor reduction, labor contraction because, as I pointed out before, automation is another reason why this talk about minimum wages right now is really irrelevant. Most corporations know that within 5 years or so, a lot of them are going to be switching to automation. We're seeing more and more of that, and I'll be doing a separate video on that topic. So historical data show that income share rises for the top, the more unemployment there is. So this is one of the more startling revelations in this study, is making a historical record that shows that income share rises for the top, the more unemployment there is. So now we're seeing one of the reasons why corporations love these boom-bust cycles and these crises and massive unemployment. And one of the things we have right now, of course, is unemployment because corporations are becoming more profitable by firing people, not hiring people and expanding. So that's where they're going to find their profit. So now we see a direct correlation that all during the 30s, corporations, of course, did quite well. The more unemployment there is, and they're certainly doing quite well now, the more unemployment there is, and apparently there's a historical trend. So we can look at the 70s and other eras that were stagnant and find this correlation. So capitalists prefer crisis over growth, and they are in a economic playground right now because we have one crisis after another. And as we've learned, looking at economics, especially over the last 5 years, that volatility is where the money is. They make money when it goes up, and they make money when it goes down. Sometimes people get caught with their pants down, but for the most part, this volatility is what's creating, and that risk that's taken is making huge profits, and that's what they like. And we have a system that's made for that, designed by them to do this. And profit and growth go hand in hand, or do they? So now we see that very basic tenet of economic ideas, the idea that growth and profit go hand in hand. Well, that is not necessarily true anymore. Now we're finding that contraction and profit go hand in hand, at least for the movers and shakers. And of course, this throws the middle class under the bus, and certainly the working class under the bus, and the poor working class are really going to experience some carnage, and that will be continued to come. So business purpose has moved from utility to market share. And that's one of the reasons why we have things like planned obsolescence, and we have all these buyouts and mergers and acquisitions, because the business purpose isn't to create a product and build your business on that and continue doing that. It's more about eliminating competition. So, for example, Coca-Cola, it's not enough for them to just do the soft drink business. They don't want anybody cutting in on their market share, so they buy out all the competitors like Odwalla. And then it becomes a situation where, just like we have with the Republican-Democrat paradigm, false paradigm, you have this setup where Coca-Cola is selling products that directly compete with each other and have a complete different demographic. And people can go, oh, I don't drink Coke, I drink natural juices like Odwalla, and they're still buying the Coca-Cola product. But anyway, let's get back to this idea. So market share means you need to not only perform, but outperform, which necessarily requires redistribution. That goes back to that idea where economically, the model now is exponential growth, continual exponential growth. And so you can't just perform, your corporation or business can't just perform its business, continue to just perform its business well. You have to outperform and continue growth. And like I say, in this, it also requires redistribution, and therefore mandatorily you're going to see more and more transfer of wealth as a result of this. In the old days, we had industry, and certainly the technological revolution was another example of that. But nowadays we have financialization. We have this profit and market share, and part of this system requires strategic sabotage, and that means somebody has to get screwed. And that's one of the things about redistribution that we see. Strategic sabotage in order for corporations, their interests. People always talk about the Henry Ford model. Oh, it's so obvious. You just pay people more so that they can buy products, and this is how we see how industry and business works if you're smart. And it doesn't work that way anymore, because now we have strategic sabotage where somebody has to get screwed, and this creates the foundations for the system where wealth is transferred up. And so we have capitalists, in order to increase market share, or also you can just call it power. You don't necessarily have to call it market share. They increase their power. They necessarily need to sabotage other companies, but also society. And I think that's another one of the great points in this article, talking about this need to sabotage other companies. So that's another thing about this new economic era we live in. It's not enough to thrive and create a business. In order to thrive and create businesses nowadays, the model is you need to fuck everybody else over. So that's another thing about this neo-capitalist system. Crony capitalism is the common term, but we also have a neo-capitalist system in the sense that this business model of having to sabotage your competitors in order to keep your market share and your power, it creates a very destructive system. And once again, the volatility that's so important to investors and then players and shakers and movers, this sort of foundation, part of the foundation, helps that to thrive. And in this system also, unemployment is a weapon. So we've seen this time and time again where they can use this to punish certain classes, and certainly now we're seeing the final showdown. And a lot of this has to do with globalization as well, because what we have is one of the reasons why the middle class and the poor working class and the entire economic system in the United States hasn't changed is something I've thought about for years, ever since listening to Ross Perot back in the day, back in the 80s or 90s. The idea that with globalization, the wages have to rise in emerging and developing markets, and in the United States necessarily they have to be lower, because at some point, kind of like the lock systems for a canal, at some point the water levels have to meet again. So right now we have U.S. wages are high, and developing world wages are low. But through globalization, at some point, all of this stuff has to level off to some degree. And I'm not going to say that wages globally are all going to be the same. That's not going to happen. But we are going to see more of a meeting point in the middle, and that's what a lot of this has to do with as well. And market share decreases in so-called boom eras, and that's another shocking thing in this report, is finding out that the power and market share of the big players actually decreases in so-called boom eras. So that's another reason why they don't necessarily want a recovery. They don't necessarily want things to be humming along. They don't necessarily want a boom, because they're doing fine, and they actually lose market share and power in these boom eras. So we're seeing them thrive right now. We saw them thrive after the tech crash. We saw them thrive during the Depression, and so on. So we see plenty of evidence, historical evidence, to show that a lot of things that people assume are just common sense and matter of fact about economics and how it should work are not necessarily true. Corporations do not need labor forces, large labor forces anymore. Corporations may or may not need consumers so much anymore. Certainly they can transfer and been hoping for mass expansion of consumer culture overseas, and so they're placing their bets on that. But I want to get to the point that one thing this article didn't bring up that I think is important is the fact that we have financialization instead of industry now. And so because, and the stock market reflects that, and certainly market share and power of too big to fail banks shows that we've switched over to financialization and an unholy alliance between financialization and military-industrial complex, and this cozy relationship of spending. And certainly the banking system finds it very advantageous to keep the United States government and therefore all U.S. citizens perpetually in debt as well. And so So financialization is really at the heart of this, and financialization and globalization are at the heart of this, and they're one and the same. A lot of this globalization has to do with intellectual properties and copyrights and technology and financialization. Industry is financialization is the master of industry. So we also have this ideas that I'm talking about here. It also has to do with crony capitalism wants crisis, and that's something that a thread that runs through everything that I just talked about as well. Crony capitalism that wants crisis, and the volatility, and that is where the drama happens, and that's where the transfer of wealth happens. So they do not want a recovery, and we see that the Federal Reserve has also facilitated all this. So being the bank of banks in the United States and owning the American monetary system, they have facilitated this whole system. So they're at the heart of it. So here's this bank who's supposed to be protecting the American government, protecting the American citizens, protecting our monetary system, and they're at the very heart of creating this this creature that we have now. And to go back to the fact that the higher unemployment is, the better the wealthy do, we have a current rate of employment growth that is near zero. So while the top 1% appropriate 20% of all income, we have near zero employment growth, and that is the number of jobs it takes to keep up with both the birth rate and immigration, and we're not doing that. So these numbers are very similar to the Great Depression. Like I say, needless to say, another good time for corporate interest. So anyway, there's a little discussion about the fact that the elites, the corporations, contrary to conventional thought in economics, they do not want a recovery. This new economic nightmare world that we live in right now, that's the new normal, and that's what they want. And it's going to just another step towards world corporate governance. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.